It is that time of the week again. We are back, episode 59 of The Next Best Bet. I'm Jake Higgins with Brett Levy, as always, the cross-country sports betting podcast, giving you the safe distancing of some picks here with the coronavirus going on. Brett, we had a weekend full of bets. We had TBT, we had some UFC. You and I stayed away from the golf. But how'd you do? Because I had a little bit of a tough time with my overzealousness with those UFC picks.
Well, I split it right down the middle, just like Morikawa on the fairway, right down the middle. I went 50-50. I won my Namajunas pick. She was dominant. What a fight. Although her pictures post fight, you couldn't really tell she won.
Yeah, late in that fight, she caught a big, big hit square in the face, and she was covered in blood. But she put up a much better fight than Andrade in a sense, and I think she deserved that win. I was all over that UFC card yesterday, Brett. I had Masvidal, I had Max Holloway winning by a knockout, TKO, or DQ. I had Namajunas paired with Jan in a parlay. Paige Van Zant winning, and then a couple of the undercard bets as well. The only one that won for me was also the Namajunas bet where I had it parlayed with Peter Yan beating Jose Aldo. And that fight should have been stopped about 20 seconds earlier because Jose Aldo was turtle shelled. He was not fighting back. And he took about 20 to 35 unnecessary punches to the head. It was kind of brutal to watch.
It was a big night for the favorites, to be honest, and we kind of talked about that on the last pod. So we need to break out that magic eight ball. You're right, Higgins.
And then there was the basketball tournament as well, the TBT. Brett, you said that you were on Beheim's Army. I did not get onto that in time for. I
Lucky
saw the
you.
games. I saw the game start about 4 minutes after it started, actually, so I didn't get a bet placed in time. But that was an ugly loss for our Syracuse team. At least, though, at least they are going to end up being loser to someone that's in the championship game.
Yeah, sideline cancer, huh? They impressed. Huge upset over overseas elite. So will be interesting. And Beheim's Army was short a few pieces. We didn't get Leiden into the bubble. We didn't get Chris McCullough into the bubble. So wasn't our full roster. We'll see what happens, but. I enjoy watching the TBT. I think the Elam ending is really I think it's really good, to be honest with you. I think it's a really good way to end a basketball game. I don't know if I'd want my NBA basketball to end like that, but in the G League, why not experiment with something like the Elam ending?
It grows on me. I still do like the clock that just 4 minutes play to the end in a sense, but the Elam ending does give you that interesting twist that makes you pay attention for that last 4 minutes or that last ending because we've seen it where the team that is up ahead can't get those final 8 points, and it becomes a much more interesting, much more different game. Once that final point total is set, it's a little hard. It gets in the heads of some kids, it seems. But we're going to talk about the TBT a little bit more and preview that championship game a little later. Before we get out of hindsight with Higgins, Brett, we didn't end up betting on the PGA Tour because we were a little concerned with the coronavirus stuff that news that came out on Wednesday with their procedure. But Colin Morikawa, who you just mentioned, played in a three-hole playoff against Justin Thomas. Morikawa edged out for the win, but JT made a 50-foot bomb of a putt. Huge break on it. It was on the first hole of the playoff hole. Great way to start OT, but he couldn't quite finish it off.
No, big win for Morikawa, and the golf's been really competitive. But to your point, and to our point on the last pod, I'm still very confused about their COVID policy.
Well, if there are players that are going to test positive and participate next week, this means they get to play alone this time. We saw it with Watney and two others this past week. So, interesting idea for them. I don't really get it. But, Brett, let's head into Beginner's Boulevard because we already talked about that last episode. We are talking about the backdoor cover this week, and it's a popular term, could be used with the Elam ending. where a team covers a point spread late in a game. They could have a full Moneyline Magic comeback. Moneyline Magic, we haven't gotten to use that very much because of the hiatus of sports, but that is another one of our recurring segments that we typically do when sports are fully running. But it's just a team that's down by a lot and they're able to cover the spread or come back and even get the win. It's an interesting way to win or lose a bet.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times, an underdog will be hanging in there and they'll find a way. You think the game's over and they find a way to make that last three, and you're like, fuck. So the game is never over for gamblers. There's always the chance of the backdoor cover. And it's always fun to kind of hear those stories and see other people share your pain.
And the Elam ending had a backdoor cover against me where I had the underdog. And I believe the number to get to was 75. And the team that I wish I remembered which game this was, but the team I was on, they had gotten to 68. So I thought, okay, they're good. 8 points. They're within seven of it. It'll be fine. But then I forgot the other team could still like make a three or something and cover the Elam ending. It just doesn't end at 75, and the favorite team ended up winning and covering because of a three-pointer late in the game. It was a little bit of a mess for me, but backdoor covers typically mean interesting endings to games.
Yeah, definitely. You see it in the NFL all the time. Those last 2-minute drives, just killing gamblers.
The Hail Mary passes, the uh, laterals with the kickoffs. There's many ways that you can lose, as
Oh,
we have learned
Gronk
as
in the
betters.
secondary for the Patriots against the Dolphins. Just name them all and all.
If there's a will, there's a way to lose a sports bet. But let's get into some of these sports because it seems like sports are still coming back, Brett. You and I are still pessimistically optimistic that it'll happen. I think that's the right way to phrase it, even though I'm using two opposing terms in a sense. But let's get into the NBA right now because some interesting news. We've seen the players complain about their accommodations. Rajon Rondo comparing his room to Motel 6. But turns out they're going to have to be a little more comfortable in there, considering that is also going to be their locker room changing room. Players have to get dressed into their uniforms before they head to the facilities.
Yeah, I mean, that's similar-ish to summer league. It's not going to be a huge problem for these guys. And you've seen some players come out and talk that there's no issues with the room. So it's a mixed bag. It depends on the person, what type of person they are, if they want to complain or if they want to go out there and compete and be happy and just be happy that they can play some basketball. So that's all fun and whatever good, but I guess the most fun I've seen in the bubble is this beer chugging that Myers Leonard and JJ Redick have been doing. We saw JJ Redick shotgun a beer in the cold tub the other day.
I
Then we
saw that
saw
one.
Myers Leonard kind of respond with a pretty impressive speed chug. So I'm excited for all the Twitter content that's going to come out of this.
Yes, we're getting some excellent behind the scenes footage and content of what's going on within the bubble. The interesting thing about the players having to show up in uniform, though, is we're not going to get the traditional NBA fashion show before the games that we have become so used to with players like PJ Tucker, James Harden, Russell Westbrook, and that's just the Houston Rockets who always seem to put on a show as they show up for their games. So it'll be a little interesting just seeing the players show up, do their post game press conferences or whatever, all in uniform.
Yeah, I mean, it would be tough for Serge Ibaka to pack all his scarves and show up to the games in Florida with his scarves. But some big news out of college athletics this week. The Big Ten, the Pac 12, conference only fall sports. So I think that's pretty big news. And we had a little poll out.
Yes, we did have a little bit of a poll out. I posted this on our Twitter page on, I want to say it was Thursday, and we got some decent interaction, but most people they don't agree that this is going to be the end of the line with what happens in college athletics. The votes were in. 81.8% say no fall sports, and only 18% say that there will be conference only play. Now, we are also going to hear from the ACC. They said they're going to give out their recommendations and their schedules by the end of July. But, Brett, I think the Ivy League is still the pillar that everyone's going to follow. I mean, it's what they did in the March. These are the smart guys from top to bottom, from the players to the coaches to everyone. If to be at an Ivy League program, you have to be smart. So I think that's going to be the route that ends up being what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I just gotta be honest with you. Like, it wouldn't bother me if I had to watch Clemson football in the spring. Like, it just wouldn't. So if that's the
We saw the
safest,
interest of spring football with the XFL this year, and they're defunct now, so
yeah.
it would be fine.
So
I'd enjoy it.
I mean, I'd be okay with it. To be quite honest, and if that's the safest way to do it, so be it. I don't know what's gonna happen with the fall sports schedules. I do think that the conference thing makes a lot more sense than flying everyone coast to coast and doing whatever. But to the same point, like, isn't Rutgers closer to Penn State and Syracuse and Maryland? Well, I guess Penn State and Maryland are in the Big Ten, but it's closer to like Syracuse and UConn. Like, would it make more sense to divide it up by states? Like, North Carolina schools play South Carolina schools and Georgia schools, and you stay in these little triangles. I don't know the best way to do it, but at least conference play seems reasonable.
I like the state idea you just proposed. Kind of make it like the high school hierarchy of you play for a state championship or something. You know what? It's a weird year. Let's just throw out the divisions for 1 year. Georgia football is going to play the D3 schools in Georgia. The Bulldogs are going to be state champions. Unless maybe they lose to the Yellow Jackets for some reason. But I think that could be a funny way to do it. I don't think this is going to be the end of the line. Conference play sounds great, but I mean, these are certain states like California aren't going to have players or students back on campus.
Yeah,
So, what does that
California.
mean for the Pac 12 and Oregon or Washington or Arizona? I mean, each of these states handle it differently, and they're all varyingly different demographics in terms of how the coronavirus has reacted.
Higgins, to your point, Larry Scott, the Pac 12 commissioner, has tested positive for COVID. So, if anyone should know a thing or two about the problems this disease can cause, it should be the Pac 12.
Yes, I'll be interested to see what the ACC decides to do. Notre Dame football's kind of sitting in no man's land, though, Brett. They have forever been proud of the fact that they're not in a conference, but to be honest, I think that this might be the end all be all that forces Notre Dame to finally do what it does with the rest of its sports programs. Go into the ACC. It's the smart play. They should. They shouldn't be
Well,
just
they
exempt
they might get
otherwise.
lucky. They might get lucky because they play six ACC games anyway, so they might just get to keep those six. Or, maybe they play the other independents. BYU is another independent. They have a strong football pedigree as well. I'm sure many fans out there remember all the BYU greats: Steve Young, Ty Detmer, uh, more recently Taysom Hill with the Saints. So there are other independent schools out there. Maybe they just play those guys. I don't know. It's going to be a weird year for sure, as you said.
And as we mentioned as well, spring football, always an option, and I'd be up for it. But what isn't really an option right now is continuing to postpone these seasons for some of these professional sports. Because, I mean, the NBA, they've talked about how next season's going to be an interesting scheduling disaster in itself, depending on how long this or how successful this bubble is right now. The MLB, they have the 60 games. They're still finding out players that are going to be exempt, that are opting out, that are opting in. Yu Darvish, a foreign born player, he basically was pressured and swayed by his teammates' conviction of it being worth to play, that he's going to end up playing for the Cubs. I think this is a severely personal decision for everybody, and if your teammates kind of put you at ease, I guess that's good to help you make your decision, but I think this is something that everyone needs to be trusted to be allowed to make on their own.
Yeah, I think everyone should make their own decision. I don't know what swayed him to play versus like what didn't, but I think those are interesting comments for sure.
Now, Kenley Jansen, he's recovered from the coronavirus, so we'll see uh, whether he's going to be on the Dodgers roster and to what extent their reliever is going to be able to participate in this shortened season. But the MLB has a lot going on because, I mean, the Atlanta Braves, there were talks of taking their name or changing it or doing something like that because of all the discussions that have been going on with other sports teams. And they said they're not changing their name, but they will take a look at the tomahawk chop that the all the fans do in in unison with each other.
Yeah, I brought it up to you. I don't know if it was the last episode or 2 episodes ago, but we talked about it. We were like, okay, with Washington football team changing their name, Cleveland's baseball team is probably going to have to do something similar. But like, did the Kansas City Chiefs have to do it? Did the Atlanta Braves have to do it? And I think you and I both kind of came to the conclusion that yeah, maybe the tomahawk chop is probably the place to start with that conversation because Chief and Braves, those are more positive names, at least in nature, than some of these other team names. So uh, I'm not going to tell anyone how they should feel when they hear Atlanta Braves, but I definitely don't think that is as negative in nature as some of these other team names.
Yes, and it is a conversation that widely varies based on the name because I mean Washington's name in football, that is a racial slur for Native Americans, whereas like what you said with Chiefs or Braves may not be considered the same by as widely agreed upon with people. It seems like it's going to be a case by case basis, but there should be a review of each of these teams, I think, as they look at it. But Brett, I mentioned Kenley Jansen testing positive for coronavirus. Aroldis Chapman with the Yankees also tested positive, according to Aaron Boone, and so they're going to have a different end man to finish out their games.
Hey man, Zach Britton can close baseball games. He was doing it with the Orioles before he was a Yankee, and he's gonna step in for the Yankees while Chapman's out. I think that's if there's a team that could take a hit to the back end of their bullpen, it's definitely the New York Yankees. So I think they'll be able to survive this, but I don't know. I obviously Chapman's a key cog there, and he was a huge piece of the Cubs World Series title. He's been very good on the Yankees for his time there, so it'll be interesting to see.
Bring back Dakota. When in doubt, short 60-game season, I'm sure Mariano could throw if he needed to. But so we've talked about the MLB, we've talked about the NBA now. The NHL still is being quiet. They're being the typical NHL that they have been throughout this entire coronavirus process. And in fact, there may be more quiet on the Western Front from the NHL, considering that they're going to prohibit teams from releasing coronavirus test results, and this is after conversations between the league and players to help ensure medical privacy of players. The league is going to be releasing league-wide results, but they're not going to break it up by team to potentially give up players uh, medical conditions.
I think that makes sense. You want to protect the players, you want to protect the teams. So I think it all makes sense. We'll see what happens. The MLB thought they were gonna do all this protecting the players, and some players just tweet it out themselves. Some teams handle it differently. It's also kind of weird when a player is there on Tuesday and then not there on Thursday.
It's a
So
little
you're like,
noticeable.
yeah, so it's one of those things where I think it's good in nature. We'll see how it actually pans out.
I agree. NHL still looking at Edmonton and Toronto for their hub cities. So heading up north to Canada. That's why I think I'm most hopeful about the NHL being able to finish their season compared to maybe the MLB or the NBA because Canada's done better with that. But we will see because all it takes is a few coronavirus cases to potentially burst these bubbles, and they are very fragile scenarios.
Well, the NFL is just going to build an arena in Abu Dhabi so everyone can quarantine there and play 16 weeks on Fight Island. It'll be great.
Oh no, it'll be called Football Island
Football
because
Island,
I'm sure
excuse me.
Dana White's already trademarked Fight Island. So Roger would have to go with something else.
Football Island, games every hour of the day. That's what I want.
Speaking of Football Island in terms of a name, the Washington team has some big news about a potential name coming out, and I've seen some trends on Twitter. Pat McAfee earlier in the week, him and his crew on his radio show, they came up with the name DCFC, and I saw on Twitter Washington Football Club trending, and basically a play on words of treating it like a soccer team but using football club like what is used internationally. I kind of like it, to be honest. I think it's kind of cute.
I think a lot of people have hopped on this Red Wolves trend. Have you seen that one? The Red Wolves?
Well, I understand jumping on the red trend because apparently the teams are going to keep the burgundy and gold at least for this season, and that's just probably for ease of transition in the meantime. But I don't know if you keep the name red in there. I don't know if you just go for an entire. Why can't it just be the Washington Wolves?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still again huge replacements fan. Washington Sentinels, silver helmets, red jerseys, silver pants, Shane Falco, Gene Hackman coaching. I'm all for that. But by the time you're listening to this podcast, you might even have more information than us because more details are expected to come out throughout the day Monday.
Yes, on Sunday, Charles Robinson was on the ESPN radio down in Dallas Fort Worth, the station down there, and he announced that in the next 24 to 48 hours that Washington would reveal its new name and potentially the logo as well. Seems like since that news came out this morning from Robinson, Washington's tried to get ahead of that, and so now sometime on Monday, we're going to be finding out this new team name, and it should be really interesting, Brett, because once that name has been decided, and obviously they have that name decided on now if they already are announcing that they're going to unveil something to the public, they can't still be deciding on it tonight as we're recording this and not have a decision, in my mind at least. But once they have that decision made and they go public with it, then comes the removal of the old name and logo and quick replacement all throughout all of the facilities. Like, that's a lot. That is a lot of different names and places within the building that you have to paint over.
Well, I'm sure it's started to happen over the past few years. At least you would think, but who knows what goes on in between those walls? And you'll get Twitter updates from us or Instagram updates, and we'll keep you posted on the latest news from the press conference.
Yes, make sure to follow us on social media at NBB Pod on Twitter, at Next Best Bet on Instagram, and the Next Best Bet Facebook page where we will be posting in between podcast episodes, giving you updates about things that we have been talking about on this show. And the NFL is obviously one of them, Brett, and they are trying to get a season going still. We talked about the fact that preseason games are going to be getting cut. We've talked about that a few times now. But now that the procedures and things like that have been decided on, it seems like the owners want the players to take a pay cut at least this season. I saw a rumor of it being as much as putting 35% of the players' salaries in escrow for this season, so they would get the money, just not this year, and the money would go to them, I believe, next year. Uh, it's the same thing that happened in the MLB, where it was okay. We're going to decide on the health and safety protocols, and then oh, by the way, because we can't have fans, you need to lose money because of this, and it's again, it's why the players are the ones that are endangering themselves by providing the product. It's the owners aren't the ones endangering themselves by providing the product, just financially they are.
Yeah, it's messy. I agree with your point. I mean, or excuse me, Drew Rosenhaus's point of the players deserve to be paid more. Yeah, I mean, you raise a fair point. Like, you want to talk about safe work conditions in the NFL. It's probably never safe. You have 300-pound men colliding into each other at max speed every play. But B, this is probably the least safe it'll ever be. So, he raises a fair point. It's just one of those things like, if you don't have people paying for the parking and paying for the concessions and then buying a jersey and buying this and buying that, it just the revenue is less and there's less money to go around. It is an unfortunate side effect of the whole thing. Um, but yeah, there's no great way to do it, to be honest. Although I will say this, Higgins, I personally believe, and I could be wrong, I'm not saying this is 100% accurate, but I personally believe the league affected by not having fans the least, or whatever, the money impact where it's the least amount is the NFL. I think NFL attendance is relatively low nowadays. I think people want to be home watching the Red Zone channel, watching all the games, keeping track of their fantasy team, their daily fantasy team, their bets, their this, their that. So there's so much content being consumed from the NFL on a Sunday in that 1 p.m. window. You almost can't go to the Jets game to sit there
It's
and watch them lose.
I agree. It's kind of why blackout games have become more and more of an issue over the past decade or so because as uh, attendance declines, these bubbles in terms of being able to or not able to watch the game seem to be growing bigger and bigger as the NFL's trying to get more people into the seats. But don't worry, Brett, the NFL's doing something for coronavirus protection. Once the game is over, the players can't go shake hands in the middle of the field and they can't trade jerseys because, for 60 minutes, the coronavirus is an acceptable risk to take for a game to happen. And they're allowed to hit each other and be at extremely close contact. But the second that clock hits zero, stay as far away from me as possible, is what the NFL's saying for the players to do.
Yeah, I mean, from a big picture, it's hilarious. From a small picture, you're minimizing risk as much as possible. So I get why they say that. But yeah, I'm with you. If I'm chasing number 7 around all game, right, and I'm tackling him, and if I want to dap him up after the game, so be it. I just I basically was lying on top of him for 60 minutes.
Literally breathing in someone's face in the trenches when you're talking about linemen
Yeah.
lined up inches away from each other's faces, panting heavily because it's a high octane sport where your breath is going to be you're going to be breathing pretty heavy, breathing pretty quick.
Not to
But
mention there could be some blood on the field. It's just, yeah, it's silly. I'm with you, but they're just doing their best to minimize risk. That's all it is.
yes, I understand it. It seems a little tone deaf in a sense, in my opinion, kind of like what the Patriots did with their salary cap shortly after signing Cam Newton. I mean, you sign Cam to this low salary cap deal, basically $1 million veteran minimum almost. And the Patriots, I mean, they haven't had any money in their salary cap all summer long or all off season long. That's probably the biggest selling point they kept making to Cam on why it was so hard for them to be able to offer him a decent sized contract. Well, a week after they signed Cam Newton, The Patriots now have 7.79 million in cap space compared to the 500,000 that they had in cap space because they settled the AB lawsuit over that $9 million signing bonus. They settled on a lawsuit with Aaron Hernandez, and they restructured Rex Burkhead's contract. So that freed up over $7 million for the team. And now they can go out and they can sign a target for Cam. They can get a lineman. They can get someone for defense, whatever they need.
Feels like a trade or something's gonna come, right? Because they managed to get Cam up there with no salary cap. So I feel like if they wanted to sign someone, they would have just found a way. That's what the Patriots do. It's
Mm-hmm.
annoying. I'm a Jets fan. It's brutal.
The Aaron Hernandez name is what surprised me in this because they didn't say like in the articles I've read at least no one was saying settled with the family of Aaron Hernandez or with the estate of Aaron Hernandez or whatever. It says nope, settled with Aaron Hernandez. So you settled with someone that's not how do you agree to something with someone that isn't alive to verbally or signaturely agree to some. I don't get that, but that's semantics. The Patriots just doing Patriots things. It's always aggravating to see.
Well, that's they get loopholes closed, they get magic money out of nowhere, so that's the Patriot way.
Yes, but before we head out of here, we do have some upcoming sports that will be taking place, Brett. We mentioned the TBT, the basketball tournament, the finals, the championship game that's happening on Tuesday night, 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific time. And it's the Golden Eagles versus Sideline Cancer. I might have to root for Sideline Cancer considering they took out Bayheim's Army, Brett.
I know. Two new teams in the championship this year. No overseas elite, no Carmen's crew. So, should be a good game between Sideline Cancer and Golden Eagles. I can't root for Marquette, so I guess I'm rooting for the Sideline Cancer team as well, Higgins.
Well, I'm sure we will see some great basketball because this is the winner take all $1 million prize. And if you go on to the basketball tournament's website, you can see the breakdown of just each of these two teams, how much each player or coach would stand to make from winning, which I think is a very cool thing. And I heard on one of the broadcasts, Brett, because they're using Zell, that one of the players from last year's team that won, he had the money in his account before he got back to his hotel room after the game. That's quick
Nice.
payment. That's a quick payment.
Yeah, did the check clear?
It
So
cleared instantly. And with Zelle, it transfers right into your bank account. It's not like with Venmo where I send you money, it sits in a balance, and then you have to transfer that into your bank account. It goes right into your account. It's kind of scary how fast Zelle can work. I think that's pretty cool. And by the way, shout out Zelle. I just gave you a pretty good promotion, so if you want to sponsor us on Next Best Bet, let me know.
maybe our money line magic, Zell?
Ooh.
Ooh.
Talk to us. Our people will talk to your people. But TBT is not the only thing we got going on, Brett, because on Wednesday, we got part 2 of Fight Island. It's happening again. Dana wastes no time.
No, and then he's got another group on the 18th. So Fight Island after Fight Island after Fight Island coming up.
Yes, Fight Island this week. It is the main card between Calvin Catar and Dan Ige. Catar's the heavy favorite, at least in Oregon, at minus 335, Brett. But Ige is sitting at plus 240. We've seen him fight recently. I mean, very recently he fought, I believe, during quarantine even. So that my money might be going on the underdog there, even though I just lost betting on a lot of the underdogs this past weekend.
Yeah, Higgins, the sports books might just be telling you take the chalk.
Ige though, he's done pretty well. I mean, he's won his last 5 fights. He's a wrestler against a striker, so you never know. Does this turn into a ground battle or a stand-up knock 'em out brawl? Those are two very different fights, and I think it'll be interesting to see. That's going to be on Wednesday. On next Saturday, which we will talk to you about in episode 60. That's going to be UFC Fight Night of Figueredo versus Benavidez. 2. It's the rematch between those two, so it should be an interesting one as well. I don't have any picks right now. I'm leaning Ige, but we will see whether I actually pull the trigger on that. Follow us on social media. I'm sure I will give out some picks as we get closer to Wednesday, though. At NBB Pod on Twitter, at Next Best Bet on Instagram, and the Next Best Bet Facebook page. So, Brett, that's it. That's episode 59 in the books. We've talked about all the sports that we've had previewing these seasons that are supposed to be coming. We got TBT on Tuesday, UFC on Wednesday, and we will be recording Wednesday night to give you a weekend's look, and episode 60 of the Next Best Bet. That'll be coming up right around the corner. For Brett, I'm Jake. We'll talk to you after the weekend.